Hello, everyone. So here we are getting ready to start prints and drawings. And this is a really important section. As many of you know, when you're working in trades and you're taking something that needs to be completed, and there's a lot of factors. It needs to look good. It needs to work properly, and somebody needs to make some money while they're doing that. So being able to first of all have a great design, and then being able to implement it and bring it to the end of the project, very, very important. And this section is it really involves the key skills in making that happen. So any project that will move from just being a concept or an idea to being a completed, finished reality is going to have a really carefully designed plan in order to make that happen. Now, when the client or the owner, will say whoever has the idea, decides that they want to build something, what they normally do is they're going to contact an architect, and then what the architect's job is to do is to take kind of the ideas that the owner describes to them and put it down into a plan. And we call that plan a concept or a preliminary plan. And then he can give that back to the owner. The owner can look at that and say, okay, yeah, that's what I had in mind, or actually I wanted something a little bit different. So they can converse back and forth a little bit, and they can decide. But in the end, the architect is going to have some kind of a pretty, it's going to have all the key points in it. Maybe not a lot of detail, but what it will look like, generally how much space it'll take up, what kind of systems that they would like to have in it, all that kind of information would be included. And then the owner would be able to look at it and say, okay, that means this matches, or I want to change something, whatever the process is. But this period of time of this back and forth between the owner and the architect can take anywhere on a small project, could be completed in a few days. Okay. But if you're planning like a huge project, a shopping mall, or some kind of a large facility where the public are going to be coming and going from, well, then those kind of projects can actually take years even in that first stage. Okay. Now, the function of construction drawings and specifications, because that's what we're talking about here, are going to be crucial to this project as it moves from being just the idea that the owner has to moving to design, and then through approvals, and finally to construction. Okay, so that is the function of these construction drawings that we're going to be talking about. Now, an adequately designed set of drawings and specifications should be everything that is needed to install and construct the work, that, whatever the project is. And really, without further instructions. Now, we all know that as you go along, changes happen. Sometimes there's conflicts between one aspect or another of the project during the project. And so one of the things that's very important is where you have a free flow of communication between it starts with between the general contractor and the subtrades, and then that climate of open communication hopefully needs to continue from there up to the architect. And normally the architect is in close communication with engineers and the owner, depending on what the issue is. So in most cases, any deviations that occur will need to be discussed between one or more of the parties. And so an open line of communication is what's going to keep that flowing really well. And when there are deviations and changes, the important thing is that it gets sent to whoever has to make a decision, and then in a timely manner, that decision gets passed back to whoever actually has to move the wall, right? So our goal in the next few periods here that we're going to be going through the prints and drawings is to understand and get an overview of this process, and particularly we want to understand the parts of it that are going to impact essentially the electrical work. Now you can see that on the board behind me here, you've probably been wondering what those outlines are. And so I was here earlier and I drew them there. And I'm going to use them now to sort of give you an overview and describe the process. Now, I have also given you a guide, a reading guide, and hopefully you either have this open in another window or you have a printed copy, even better. And so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be explaining in a little bit of detail page number 2, which is the cycle of construction drawings. And so let's go ahead and I'm gonna show you what we have. So up here we have the owner. This is the guy with the idea and hopefully the money, okay? Because you know, if he doesn't have the money, then he's gonna, if he doesn't have enough, let's put it that way, and this is how projects get started, and then they just stand for years. You know, it's when the owner runs out of money, right? So hopefully he's got enough cash to finish this thing off. So the first thing that happens is that the owner will draft up his ideas, and I'm going to call this 1. He'll draft up his ideas, generally speaking, what he wants to communicate you know, to the architect in terms of his ideas and what he wants for the project. And so the architect takes all that information in and he starts to put it together. Now, when I say architect, this is quite often an architectural group. So it's not necessarily just one person, but it can be one person if it's a small project, or it could be a group of people that were of professionals that work together and they do these kind of projects. Okay, so step number 1. This is actually the very beginning of the construction documents, the prints. Okay, this is the first step in the prints and drawings process. Now, the architect sets everything down and he draws up, you know, kind of a plan of what he thinks is going to look good, gets his graphics people on it, they draw a nice picture of it, they draw it with all the cars on the sidewalk and people walking back and forth, going in and out of the shops and all that. And once he's got everything done, then he sends this back to the owner. He says, okay, what do you think? Now at this point, the owner can go, sweet, that's exactly what I wanted. Or he can go, I wanted it to be smaller, or I wanted it to be bigger, or I've decided to actually build it in a different town, right? So all of these things can happen, but the main process is this, is that the first step is that the owner sends his ideas. Then the second step is that the architect gives them back. Now let's just say that this owner is very agreeable, says, yes, that's exactly what I wanted. And so what he does then is he says, here you go back, and I've got the money ready. And so you can go ahead and start on it, okay? And this is number 3 right there. You go ahead and start, get the engineers involved, and let's see what needs to happen here. So at this point, the architect says, great. And so he puts all the drawings, everything together on a disk, and probably usually also some hard copies, and he sends them to the engineers. And I say engineers because there could be actually, this is probably also a group, because you're going to have electrical engineers who are going to make electrical drawings. You're going to have you know, like plumbing engineers that are going to go through and do all of that, all the plumbing and all that part of the service part. You're going to have structural engineers that are going to design the framework of the buildings. You're going to have landscape people. You're going to have, you know, on and on. All these people that are going to put all this stuff together. Now, this is where the actual detailed information starts to come together. So let me start by showing you this line. This is the architect sending the stuff to the engineer, okay? And this is number 4. Now, what I want you to realize is that 1, 2, 3, and 4, all of these steps, the drawings have a certain name. Now, this is the same set of drawings that you're going to use when you're laying out the service in the building. It's the same set, but at this point, the name that is given to these is concept and preliminary. Okay, preliminary drawings, concept or preliminary drawings. Now, at this point, once the engineers have gone through it, and this can take a while, right? Because these are the guys that have to make sure that the building, that nice looking building that the architect drew up is actually going to stand up. And so they have to put in the support beams where they have to be, and they have to make sure that the windows are the right size and everything's going to work. The electricians have to look at it. The electrical engineers have to look at it and say, this building is going to use about this much power. We need to have a service that's about this size. And they start doing calculations on load and things like that. And so now what happens is once they're finished, now the engineers take their product, their set of plans, and they give it back to the architect. Now these plans, this is step 5, and they now have a different name. They now have a different name. And the name, I'll give it to you in a couple minutes, okay? So what you go is, here's step 5. Now the architect then goes and says, okay, I have these plans. The engineers have gone through it and detailed everything. I know, I have a lot of very, very specific information now. And the next thing that we need to look at is this building okay with everybody? And so what we call this next step is regulatory. Regulatory. So they have to say, they have to send it to the all the government agencies. They have to looking for permits for all of the different things. They have to go to land use to see if the area is zoned for that kind of a building. So there's a whole bunch of permitting processes, not the least of which is, for instance, the supply authority. You got to go to, now if this building was here, you'd have to go to BC Hydro and say, look, we want to build this project, it's this size. And so they have people that actually go over the plans and say, okay, that building's going to take about this much power, and in that neighborhood, that means we're going to have to upgrade some line to supply power, and so on. So regulatory is the next step. And so the architect sends the plans to the correct bodies who are going to either give their thumbs up or give their thumbs down. And so regulatory is the next one. Now, once this has all been said and done, they're going to send this back, and they're either going to say yes or they're going to say no. And what we need to look at is, there's we're looking at the overall process right now, but obviously I do want to talk about this just briefly. Let's say that at any point somebody can say no in here. It could be up here. The owner could say, after the architect does his first set of drawings, the owner could say, no, it's not what I want. So then you wind up with back and forth, right? You could go to here and you could send this stuff to the engineers and they could go, that's not going to work. That building's just not practical. And but they don't usually do it because it's usually a lot of money for them in it, so that's not really going to happen like that. But they'll say, we should do it this way. It's going to cost you a little bit extra, but it'll be a superior turnout. When it comes to regulatory, they basically look at it, they follow their guidelines, they say yes, it's approved, or no, it's not approved. Now, if something is not approved, when it comes back to the architect, then they're going to have to look at it in a couple of ways. Number one, they might have to talk to the engineers to see what they need to do to change it so it will be approved. It might mean a lot more money, so they might have to talk to the owner to see if the owner says, yeah, it's okay, yeah, I understand, okay, I got, that's good, go ahead and do it. I got deep pockets. And but all of that is handled through, it goes back to the architect deals with whoever has to make a decision, and then they carry on. So at this point, let's just say that this passed all the regulatory, everything's good. Now, the drawings now have to be, they say, okay, who's going to actually build this project? We need to find a general contractor. And so what they do is they go, okay, well, we're not going to just choose the first contractor who comes along. So what we're going to do is set this out for tender, Okay, and I'm going to put out for tender. Now we could say prospective contractors. So what we want is we're going to take a nice big package of all of the documents. We're going to give it to a bunch of different people and say, how much is this going to cost, and can you do it? Are you capable of doing this size of project? And so this step would be step number 8 right here. Okay, and let me put that in here. And now it's out for tender. Now, at this point, let me just stop a moment. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So up here, 1, 2, 3, and 4 were called concept or preliminary. Now, in the next steps, we had steps 5, 6, and 7. 5, 6, and 7. And 5, 6, and 7, they were actually called, what the plans are called during this time is issued for approval. Issued for approval. And that's usually written right on. It's one of the revisions right on the plans. It'll be stated that they're issued for approval and what the date is. And then, so as soon as the engineers are done with it, they issue it to the architect for approval. And of course, it has to go to the regulatory people for approval. And then, it comes back and they say, yeah, it's approved or not approved. Now, when we come to 8, I'm going to change the color. 8 is a new, we're going to have a new name here now. And this is called issued for tender. In other words, we want bidders who are going to give us a price. So issued for tender. So what happens, now this is an interesting step, and you really got to understand this one. This is tricky. This is a very complicated process in some ways, because these guys, first of all, have to be pre-qualified. So the architect is not going to send this to somebody who doesn't have connections in industry, because here's what has to happen. The engineers have said, we want this brand of MCC for all the motors. We want this brand of panels. We want this brand of fire alarm system. And all of that is going to be specified in the specifications document, which has now been added to the concept or preliminary drawings and is now part of that package. So they say, okay, who's actually capable of doing this? So the people who are going to bid on it literally have to be able to provide, like they have to have connections to be able to do what's stated in the specs. And so here's what happens. Now, this is going to be like a general contractor, right? And they're going to go, well, I see in this project that we have, for instance, this certain type of panels, and I need 35 of these panels in various sizes. And so it goes, I know at least 4 different vendors who I can buy these panels from. And I wonder who's going to give me the best price. And so we're going to call these guys, the people that actually supply the equipment, we're going to call them the vendors. The vendors. And the next step in the construction drawing process is that the people who are actually, they don't even know if they have the job yet. But what they're doing is making up a bid package. And so they go, okay, so they'll send it out. And now this could be 1, 2, 3, 4 different people that they send this information out to try and find out what the best price and who's going to give them the best product and the best timing, okay, to meet their timelines. So the next step then is that step number 9 is that the prints are sent to the vendors so that they can bid on the equipment. And there's something else very interesting that's required at this time, and it's this. The vendors who actually are going to provide the equipment now have to provide a plan that will become part of the overall set of construction drawings if they get the job, okay? And those plans are very, very specific plans that are called shop drawings. And the shop drawings give all the details of the equipment that these vendors are going to supply. And the reason they have to have those very specific drawings is that these guys are saying, if we get the job, we're going to supply this product at this price. And so these guys go, okay, I can deal with that. That's a good price. I think we can get the job at that. So they take those shop drawings. So step number 10 is right here. It's the vendors sending the drawings back here, okay? Now, at this point, this is step 10, the shop drawings are included right here because the vendors have to give the shop drawings so that they can be included in the bid. Now we can take, and these bidders can now take and send this back to the architect. And these are the bids, the sealed bids that the architect is going to open, and he's going to look at them and try and decide who he's going to give the job to. Who are we going to award this contract to? And so before they make that decision, usually what happens is these shop drawings that were given for all this equipment are actually usually forwarded to the engineers, and they look it over and give their approval, and they say, yeah, actually, yeah, that does meet our spec. Yep, that's good. And they sign off on it, and they say, yeah, that stuff's good. So then the architect will say, okay, perfect. Everything's in place. Now let's just see where we are at here. 5, 6, and 7 were issued for approval. 8. So we've got now 8, 9, 10, and 11. 8, 9, 10, and 11. Now, what are the drawings called now? Well, these are called issued for tender. So these are the documents that are used for the bidding process. That's the bidding process, okay? Now, the architect finally has all the bids, he makes his choice, and the contract is now awarded. Okay, so this is going to be 12. The contract is awarded to a general contractor. So here's the general contractor. This is the winner of the bidding war. General contractor. And at this point, these drawings, I'm going to put the numbers up here. So this is step 12. Now, what does the contractor do with them? Well, he then goes and he'll have, also during the tendering process, most general contractors will have a group of people that they work with, and he would have asked for bids from the different subtrades. So now he's going to call his subtrades, and he's going to go, guess what? We got the job. And so here we're going to start. This is going to be, I'm going to make this one black. So 12, this is step number 13, and this is the drawings are delivered to the subtrades. Now, these are the people like myself and yourselves that are going to actually do the work and build the project, okay? And so this is what we like to do, and we get these drawings, and now we're going to open them up, and we're going to pour over every detail and make sure we understand what's going on. We're going to read the specs to make sure we don't miss anything, and we're going to actually do the work. Now, one of the interesting things that happens, and if you've been around prints on a job site, you're going to be aware of this. You're going to do something, and then there should be a nice clean set of prints exactly for the purpose, and you should be going and saying, now, when I went to run this conduit that was shown on the print going down this hallway, there was actually an air duct right in the way. And so I actually had to jog over. I had to put a junction box, and then I had to, go past it, okay? So you draw that in, you draw the junction box, and you move it on. And what is that drawing called? Well, we call it an as-built, or the way you actually built it, as-built. And it's super important to keep track, really good track of those, all of those, any deviation to the plan, anything that you do like that needs to be carefully recorded. And at the end, once you've finished everything off, what you're going to do is you're going to take those drawings, okay, and you're going to give them back to the general contractor. And it's his responsibility, it's normally stated in the specs, to, within a certain period of time after the job finishes, to deliver the as-built to the architect. And everything has to be recorded. And it usually has to be done in AutoCAD and completely professionally done, and all listed down. So this will be step number 14. Now from here, we look at it, and all the way through up to essentially these two steps, 12 and 13, I'll put it down like this. 12 and 13 are what we will call working drawings. Working drawings. Now remember, this is the same set of plans. It's the same set. It's just that as it goes through the process, it keeps picking up more stuff. When it gets to the engineers, it picks up more technical details and schedules and sections. And then when it gets to the regulatory, sometimes they add documents that get actually put into it, permits and things like that. When it gets to the vendors, they put in shop drawings, right? Now, once it gets out and the work gets done, we have as-built. And so this set of plans is becoming more and more detail rich. That's very important stuff. And so at this point, we call it the working drawings. And the last steps, and I'll just change the color on this one. I'll make this one blue. So 14, and then this is actually going to be from the general contractor. It's going to go like this. 15, it's going to go back to the architect. And the last step is going to be right here. And this is going to be 16. And at the very end of the day, so these last steps, 14, 15, and 16, 14, 15, and 16, we already just briefly mentioned this. These are called as-built. Okay, so now you have a pretty concise idea of actually, you know, it's the life cycle really of a set of plans. And interestingly enough, at the end of the project is not the end of what's considered to be the life cycle of the plans, because as long as that building stands in one piece, the as-built drawings are used for sometimes decades. And what they're used for is people who do maintenance, people who come in to do renovations, additions, any kind of a change. You know, if you can get a set of the original as-built and you go back to it and look at that stuff, extremely valuable and helpful in the process. Okay, so you know, that gives you an idea really of the cycle of the construction drawings. Reading the prints and searching through the drawings is very rarely the responsibility of just one person, you know, on a construction site. And so, you know, it's you know, I've had it happen a number of times myself, where an apprentice would maybe be sent to say, okay, go check the plan and see how many of these fixtures that we need in the parkade. And then they would, you know, come back and say, yeah, you know, I was looking at the types of fixtures that we have there, and I noticed that in the, you know, in the storage room, it's actually a different type. And everybody's going, what? And so, you know, and that can go all the way up through, you know, all the way up to whoever did the takeoff when they were doing the bid actually missed that it was a different type. And so, you know, it's not, I guess my real key point here is it doesn't matter who it is. You can make yourself very valuable by paying attention and looking carefully. And normally if the estimator is very careful and you know, and the supervisor of the project is really careful, you know, you can avoid some of those things, but anybody can find things that have been missed. And normally speaking, if you can catch things soon enough, you know, you can save a lot of trouble. And so the more attentive, essentially, the more eyes that pass over the prints, um, the better. And so what happens is, if you can see something and get it solved early, it's normally a lot better. So the kind of understanding of the prints, sort of really getting a feeling of understanding what's going on in a set of prints, is not something that comes by a quick glance here and there. So it really comes with spending some time looking at them. If at all possible, it's nice to get a set of prints and you know, it sounds funny to say reading them, but really you're just looking from page to page, getting a feeling of how it's laid out, looking at the notes, looking at the schedules. Then you start to see links, right? And you go, oh, that's neat. That note actually refers to this thing that I saw that I didn't really understand what it was, but now this note explains it perfectly, and so on. So basically what happens is, the more time you spend looking at the plans, you actually start to have a model of the project inside your head, and it becomes much easier, you'll find, as you go along, to be able to quickly look, say, oh, I need to check this thing on the plans. You know exactly where to turn to, which page to roll out, and you're going to find that stuff a lot quicker. So it's similar to any kind of study, right? The more time that you spend on it, you become more proficient at it, and you start to feel more confident about it. Now, I want to talk about the contract. Now, we're talking about the contract that exists between, it's essentially made between the owner and his agent, which is really the architect, and the general contractor. Now, that contract contains three parts, really. And the three parts are the written and signed portion, okay, the written and signed part of the contract. The second part of the legal document that you are signing as a general contractor is the actual the working drawings. So it's that set of drawings that has been developed all the way through. So that's the second part. And the third part is the specifications. Now, if the electrical trade in general is kind of, you know, we look at the code book as the kind of the rules section, that's where we look to really find specific information. Well, the specs is kind of the same thing to the construction contract. And so the specifications are just as important a part as the actual drawings and plans that you're looking at. And so the idea is that if everything is in there, it's specified, the time frames, the, you know, the exact way in which the work is to be done, issues around like other like safety things that need to be provided during the period of the time of the contract is being actually built. And so most people, you know, with quite a bit of experience in the industry would agree that the specifications are at least as important or more important than the actual drawings. And what you'll find is that if there is a disagreement between when something is built and at the end the owner says, well, wait a second, that's not what I asked for, and we say, and so everybody disagrees, and so they get a bunch of lawyers involved, and they start to look and they say, well, what does it say in the spec? Now, interestingly, the spec normally takes precedent over the actual drawings, okay? So the drawings are important, but the spec probably even more important because it normally provides more detail and specific information about how to deal with discrepancies and things like that. So if you don't follow the right process as laid out in the spec, then you're gonna wind up on the hook normally for whatever changes have to be made. So Now, the written contract is kind of outside of the scope of what we're talking about, so we're not going to worry about that. But we are going to look at the working drawings, and we are also going to investigate a little bit towards the end the specifications, so we understand a little bit about that that book. Okay. Now, I want to talk about standards a little bit. There's been a lot of work done through the years in terms of making sure that we always use the same symbols or similar symbols. And so there are some standards, but what I've found myself is that there are so many different objects, drawing objects, types of lines, types of things, that from one set of plans to another set of plans, you can look at one and it will show you know, a certain part of the system shown with a certain symbol. You go to another set of plans for a different project and you're going to find the same symbol used for something else. And so it's not 100%. So what I would say, and this is kind of a disclaimer, make sure that you investigate on the project that you're working on and look and make sure that you understand there's normally a legend that gives all the symbols and the specific references that you're going to need for that project. And very important to be aware of that, because you know, not understanding and using a wrong component because you thought the symbol meant something else can be very, very costly and time consuming. So make yourself aware of what the actual legend is indicating on the set of plans that you're looking at. Very, very important, okay? Now, the issued for construction working drawings that have now emerged through this whole process, they've come down from the architect and they're now in the hands of the subtrades, the people that are gonna build it. And so now we need to take a look at those plans and see, we need to see, you know, how they're laid out. And just give me a moment. I'm going to draw a couple of things on the board, and then we'll carry on with that. Okay, now very similar to actually when we were in electronics, I gave you an alphabet, kind of an alphabet of what the different letters meant for the different leads on the components. When it comes to prints and drawings, we also have kind of an alphabet, and these are the letters that go with the different types of sections that you will find in the construction drawings. Normally, we would start with architectural. Now, these are the drawings that are gonna basically be outlining the actual the structures. Okay, the structures and things that are going to be built in terms of the framework and so on of the whole building. Okay, architectural. Now, these sheets, as we would call them, the sheets that are part of the plans. Okay, we call them sheets. And these ones will be lettered A. So if it's, you know, it could be 0, 1, 0, 2, and so on, to as many architectural sheets as there are. The next one, structural. So architectural and then structural. So the architectural normally is elevation views, what the thing will look like, views, roof lines, things like that. Structural, which will be S sheets, are going to be the actual inner workings of support. So support for different things, how the walls are put in, how the beams connect together, and like that, structural, okay? Electrical. Now, these are going to be the sheets that we'll spend a fair bit of time looking at, and these are going to be lettered E. This will be the designator of these sheets. When it comes to things like air handling, fans, air conditioning, different systems like that, heating and air conditioning, mechanical. Also includes a lot of times, for instance, if there's hot water heating, water pumping, things like that. Now, these sheets, M, okay, so it kind of makes sense. Let's go ahead, the next one, plumbing. Okay, plumbing. And these sheets normally labeled with a P in front of them. Now, fire protection. It used to be that a lot of times fire protection was just included on electrical, but the systems have become very, very large and elaborate in a lot of cases, depending on the size of the project. And so now in many cases, they have their own set of sheets, and it's F. Then civil. Now civil would have to do with particularly the site, okay? So it would have to do with roads, garage entrances, structures around the property that might, be part of the project, but not really part of the actual building per se. But roadways, sidewalks, all that sort of thing, okay? Things to do with property lines, civil, and those would be labeled with a C. And quite often, depending, of course, now these aren't going to be on all of them, but on larger projects, the landscaping would also have a set, and that would be L. Okay, now that's not a complete list, okay? There, on some projects, there may be some additional sections with different ones, but these really cover most of the main sections, okay? So these are really just the main categories that all of the different sets of plans are going to take. Now, architects obviously involved in designing these ones. Structural, this will be engineers, structural engineers. Electrical engineers involved in that. Mechanical engineers here. Plumbing engineers, then we have, fire protection people, and on. Professionals in each one of these areas who are going to put those plans together. Now, one of the things that comes up is, do we only really work as, in our trade? Primarily, of course, we're going to wind up looking at the electrical drawings, but because of the work that we do, which is providing power for many different systems, we usually wind up being pretty heavily interested in almost all of them. Architectural for sure, making sure that our main runs of conduit and things don't interfere with beams and things like that. Same structural, making sure that, architectural will be making sure that the things fit in terms of aesthetically, okay? So we would definitely be referring to architectural drawings for that. Electrical, of course, that's our layout. Mechanical, this is a big one. We have to work a lot together. Electrical and mechanical work a lot together because of the electric supply to a lot of the mechanical equipment. So lots of cooperation needed between those two. Even a lot of the plumbing equipment even now involves in a lot of cases a certain amount of power. So all the way through here, where to take power for your fire protection panels. Civil, we even get into this in terms of outdoor lighting, things like that. Where do light standards have to be placed by driveways and in parking lots? Okay, so we're going to be looking actually even into this one. Landscaping, a lot of times even pretty intricate lighting systems and things that are sometimes even put together with signage and landscaping. So you know what, we really wind up looking and spending time looking into virtually all of those sections. So there you have it. These are the main categories. And now what I want to do is I want to talk just briefly to give you an overview of how this works. Each and every one of these sections can be now divided out separately and looked at and broken down. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to say, it doesn't matter which one of these that you take, there are a number of different types of plans. So a plan is, okay, what's literally on the paper, okay? There are a number of different types of plans that you can come across. And so right now is where I want you to pull out this reading guide, and I'd like you to take a look and just walk through it with me, okay? So if you've got the first couple of things there. So I'd like you to turn to page 4 and look at the cover page site plan. Cover page site plan, okay? So this is the first type of plan that we can have, okay? Cover page and site plan. And these are quite often combined, quite often combined. So sometimes a cover page will strictly just have some legends and some information like that. And then the next page will be a site plan, but you'll also find it. Now, the one that I've shown you here is actually a combined cover page and site plan. So you can see there that what a site plan is it's a two-dimensional, okay? So it's a two-dimensional plan. The view is straight down. We call this a bird's eye view. Bird's eye. Okay, it's a bird's eye view. So we're looking straight down and we're going, okay, what do we have here? Now in this case, the site is actually shown by dotted lines. It shows the property line going to the back, and you know, it shows the Sawyer Lane, which is the roadway in front of the house of this project that's being built. And you can see where the driveway entrance is going to go in. It's going to go in. There's a garage at the end. There's a little turnaround in the driveway, and you can see the layout of the house slightly at a different angle than the garage. And in the front, it's even mentioned here on this site plan, staging area. On the front lawn, they've got it set up. So before they do the landscaping, they're going to use this for equipment and stuff like that during the construction process. So two-dimensional, bird's eye view, and it normally shows property lines, and usually shows a north symbol. Okay, shows you where north is on the plan. That's quite important to be able to get your bearings and know where you're at and where things are at. And one of the other pieces of information quite often shown, and you'll see it on this one, it's actually just beside the sidewalk, on the, and I'm going to call this the west side of the driveway, on the west side of the driveway. And because we know where north is, that makes it pretty easy to see that. You're going to see a black dot and it says benchmark. Now the benchmark is quite often shown on the site plan because the benchmark is like an elevation pin, and all of the elevations and the specific elevation stuff in terms of how high the building is, what level the floors are on, how deep the basement is going to be dug below that point, all that information is taken, surveyed from the benchmark, okay? So quite often shown on the site plan is the benchmark. Very important point of reference, benchmark. And it's an elevation. This is an elevation marker. Elevation. All right, so that's the, that gives you an idea. Now the site plan normally shows just the property, and it shows the actual target structure, what you're gonna build, okay? Now, over on page 6, this is the second type of plan. So the first one was the site plan. This is number 2. This is called a key plan. Key plan. Now, a key plan, and you're going to see this is quite interesting if you when you take a look at this in your diagrams. The key plan, what it does is it shows essentially the site plan, but much smaller, and it shows it in context of the neighborhood or the area. So you'll look and you go, oh, okay, that's where that lot is. That's at the corner of McMurray Way and Sawyer Lane. Oh yeah, it's right beside that little green belt that went through there. So now you have more information to look at and see, oh, okay, that makes sense. So they call it a key plan, all right? The key plan. Now, a key plan is what we call normally smaller scale than the actual site plan. And when we say smaller scale, what that really means is that the actual target object, which in this case is the site that we're actually going to be building on, is actually smaller in this drawing in relationship because it shows a much larger area, okay? And so we call this small scale. In other words, the actual lot is much smaller here, and it shows a larger area. Okay, so key plan, number 1, site plan. Number 2, key plan. Let's go ahead. What's the next important plan type? Now, let me just erase this out of the middle, and I'm going to use this. I'm going to use this real estate right here for something else. Number 1, site. Number 2, key plan. Let's look at number 3. Number 3 is going to be the floor plan. Now, the floor plan, a very, very important type of plan. Okay. Now, key plan, also two-dimensional bird's eye view. Bird's eye view. So from straight above. Okay. The floor plan, two-dimensional bird's eye view, also from straight above. However, there's a couple of interesting things about the floor plan. I'd like you to take a look in your reading guide here. Some people are not aware of this. It actually makes sense once you look at this diagram and you realize, oh, that's how they actually do this. Because you know how sometimes you see a stairs, and you'll see half of it with an up arrow and half of it with a down arrow, and you're trying to visualize that? A floor plan is literally, if you can imagine the three-dimensional object like the house shown at the top just on the left there, it says 3D model showing the cutting plane. The cutting plane is normally, it's a horizontal cut that goes through the center of that floor space. So in other words, the floor ceiling height, you cut it through the middle, just like a slice, and you take the top off, and then you do a straight down bird's eye view shot of what you see. And that's why you'll actually see on that drawing anything that is up to about 4 or 5 feet high, you'll see it shown. And that's why you'll see half of a stairway, because that's about the height that the stairs would get to by the time where you made that cut. So very, very interesting to understand that about the floor plan. Floor plans show, these are normally always interior, pretty much interior spaces, okay? And these would show anything from including a basement, all the way through however many floors there are, all the way to any attic space, any kind of usable inside space, you can have a floor plan for, okay, floor plan. And there are lots of different types of floor plans. Now, one thing that you need to understand is that these plans that I'm talking about, the site plan, the floor plan, the key plan, you can have one or more of these plans for each section of the construction drawing. So in other words, you can have an architectural site plan, an architectural floor plan, and an architectural key plan. And then a few pages later, you can have an electrical site plan, an electrical floor plan, and an electrical key plan. Well, maybe not the key plan, but definitely site plan and floor plan, because what happens is, what would be the difference between an electrical site plan and an architectural site plan? Well, the architectural site plan will show parking spaces. It'll show where there's sidewalks, where the entrance is, any kind of outdoor structures, maybe arbors or things that are going to be built in a garden area. Anything like that will be shown on the architectural. When you look at the electrical site plan, which will be almost the identical plan, but it's going to show where maybe there's a lighted entrance sign to the property. Maybe there's vehicle chargers at some of the spaces. Maybe there's lighting standards around the grounds and around the parking lot. Those will be on the electrical site plan. So all of these plan types that I'm describing to you essentially could be found more or less in any one of the sections, okay? So what we're doing is really we're taking the first group of the main divisions, and we're going to split it out into the different plan types. So what's the next plan type? So we've looked at floor plan. Now here's a very important one, and it's called the section plan. So I'm going to get rid of these first three, and let's talk about the section plan. Normally, a section plan is a plan that shows in high detail, in a high amount of detail, something that is impossible to show that kind of detail on a floor plan. So typically, if you have a floor plan, okay, and it shows something, maybe there's some rooms, maybe there's a hallway, something like this, different things, and you look and you go, I wonder what, what this would look like if I could see somehow the details of this hallway a little bit. So I'd like to have more information on that. So they do something, it's kind of interesting. I'll just show you this one as an example. Imagine that you were to cut this object. This is a bird's eye view straight down, okay? So we're looking straight down from the top. What would happen if you took this and then took this piece right here and you picked it up and you turned it so that you could see it like this? This would be the hallway. These would be the rooms on each side. So now this view right here that you're looking at would be this view, okay? So this arrow on this symbol shows that the view is this way, and it's actually what we call a cross-sectional view, cross-section. So we call this a section plan, And on page number 8, you're going to see there, take a close look at page number 8. We'll point out a couple of features. It's quite interesting, the detail, way more detail that can be shown when you look at these. But just look at it, it shows you the interior, it shows you the bats of insulation literally laying in the attic. It shows you the side view of the window as you go down, okay, how the panes fit together. It shows you the insulation in the walls, the foundation blocks. So it's just like taking a slice and going through it. Now, go ahead over to the next page, and here's a really great example of the, here's a really good example of a section, okay? So please look at page 9, if you would. And on page 9, you see there, it's listed as, you see storage rooms, there's some tables, some shelves shown in there. So this is all bird's eye view, right? Washrooms on the top end. You'll see at the bottom, you see that circle, and it says AA. That means it's cross section AA. And so what you're gonna do is you're gonna go, oh, okay, somewhere on this set of plans, I'm gonna find something that it's gonna give me a whole bunch of detail on what that actually looks like. And so if you flip the page over, to page 10 and take a close look. This is literally view AA. Now you're looking at the cutaway view of that wall. You can see the roof line coming down. You can see how the blocks are done. Then there's facing brick on the outside. You can see the concrete footing. All the dimensions are given. You can see where the floor slab is. All of that information, detailed information that you could never show with a straight down view. So the section plan is something that used a lot to describe in more detail things that need to be put together. Okay, so that's number 4, right? Number 4, the section plan. Now, what's the next one? Oh, there's another example actually of there's another example on page 11 and 12, which just gives you another, more information on the same one. This one's quite interesting actually. If you look, see how the cut that goes through literally goes right through the center of, almost through the center of those 2 small washrooms. And when you actually go to the next page, and first of all, if you look carefully on page 11, see that the view that you're looking at, okay, if you were standing in either one of those washrooms, you would be looking straight toward essentially the sinks, toilets, entrance to the shower, and things like that. And if you look at, see that? That's exactly what you see on the section on page 12. See the cabinet, you see the entrance to the shower, the hallway, but this one shows you, of course, the roof line, everything like that. So section drawing, another great example of a section. So sections are detailed drawings of things that are seen on a floor plan, but you need more detail. And what I want you to do right now, before we go to the detail plan, is I'd like you to flip over to page 14. Page 14, and this is a very important point. This is the reference symbol, the reference symbol. Now, we'll talk about this a little bit because this gives a lot of information. We need to know how to read them, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give you a quick example, and it's something like this. Let's say that I have this drawing, okay? And here I have another drawing, and here I have another drawing. So I have 3 sheets here, okay? This is E4, okay? And this is a floor plan, and this is E5, and this is E6. And on this drawing, this is a section. This is a section drawing. So now on this, there could be 3 or 4 different sections drawn. Okay, so normally they group the sections or the details together in later pages. So I'm just going to give you this example. Let's say that I have an object in here. There's something on this floor plan, and through here, I see a section like this. Okay, and it looks like this. Now that is called a section reference symbol. Section reference symbol, and this one, this is the floor plan, and the object that is being indicated that there's a section of it is actually on this floor plan. Now the actual section is right here. So let's say that this is, I'm going to call it something different. This is R, okay? R and R. So over here, I've got something, and I'm looking at this. You know, this is the actual object that I want. And there's supposed to be an arched doorway in here, something like that, right? So I want to see a detail of it. So this will be R, R, like that. Now, if you look at this section symbol, this is how they're actually drawn up, okay? They make a circle. Sometimes they're only divided in half. Now, if basically the floor plan, where the thing that you want to describe in better detail and the section are both drawn on the same page, then you'll see it like this, and they just write the actual page number here. But when it's a floor plan, for instance, like this, and there's a section, and the actual section is shown on a different page, then this is split like this, okay? And in this case, okay, this would be section RR, okay? This is section RR, and the section is actually shown on E6, and it's referenced from E4. Okay, and that's the way that you actually read these when you look at them. That's a standard that's followed quite closely. So if you're looking at a section, this is how you do it. This is the page that the section is on. This is the name of the section, and this is usually a floor plan where the actual reference was made. Like, okay, you know what? You can go look and find a section. This is where the actual object is shown. Okay, so that gives you a pretty good idea of the section reference symbol. Now, sections, so section plans, as we call them, section plans are, they are two-dimensional also, usually, 2D, but they are vertical face views, vertical faces. So they're usually shown something that is, you know, it's kind of like, if it's a wall or thing, you're going to cut it and you're going to be looking at the end of it or the side of it, okay? So vertical face views. Now, let's take a look at the next plan, which is really something that we call the detail plan. So this is number 5, right? Let me just make a quick summary here. So we started with the cover page site plan, cover and site. Then we went with a key plan. Then we went with a floor plan. And then number 4, after the floor plan, came the I guess that's when we went to the section, right? Oh, wait, what am I missing? Yeah, we had the section, floor plan, section, and this will be 4 is the section. And here's our section reference, okay? This is what threw me off, starting to talk about something else. This is really part of this one, section reference symbol. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at number 5. This was 4. Now we're going to look at number 5, and this is a detail plan, detail. Now, so far, in many cases, the plans that you will see, if it's a key plan, that is what we would call a small scale, because you're showing really a very, very large area, and the object that you're showing on that plan is very, very small in comparison to the amount of area. So you're showing this little tiny lot in this neighborhood, okay? So we call that small scale. Now, when you get down to a site plan, that's a larger scale. When you get down to a floor plan, that's an even larger scale, okay? But still smaller than 1-to-1, because you're not going to have a plan that's the size of your house. So it's still smaller, it's a smaller ratio. But by the time you get down to floor plans, you may be down to like 1-to-50, sometimes 1-to-25. Now, as we go down to sections, they can still be in that same range. But now when we get to detail plans, the scale gets larger. The scale gets larger. And quite often with detailed drawings, the scale can even be 1-to-1. Okay, so detail plan. So a detail plan can include almost any view, It can be a view of something from above, from the side, from the bottom. It can be a perspective, kind of on an angle. It can literally be a section of something, but a very large scale section of an object. So these are what we call detail rich. So they're going to give tons of detail to give you a very, very good idea of exactly how something is made. And they are quite often 1-to-1, which would be actual size, okay? Or, so this is actual, right? Or in some cases, even what we would call an enlargement. So really, the drawing is actually larger than the object, okay? So, you could have something that would actually like be a 2-to-1, and you'd literally have a detailed drawing of the item, and it would be like double the size of what the actual object was in real life. So you can see how the scale changes depending on what type of plan that you're looking at. Now, after the detail plan comes the elevation plan. Okay, so number 6, elevation plan. Now, the elevation plan, interestingly enough, is what we call a side view. These are side views. Normally 2-dimensional as well, okay? 2-dimensional side view. And the views are normally indicated with compass points. And the reason that works well, compass points, is that usually somewhere on the site plan, for instance, there's going to be a north-facing arrow. So if you recall, and you may want to reference back to the actual site plan, of this particular building. Many of the drawings in here actually refer to the same building. So the site plan actually matches these elevation drawings. So let's take a look. If you look at the site plan, you'll notice that north is straight up at the top, and that the actual house is pretty much even north and south, okay? It's laid north and south, east, west, north, south, like square to the lot, or well, square to north. Um, but the garage is actually twisted maybe about, 15 degrees or something like that. Now, look at the elevation, and this is quite interesting. Now, which side is west on the site plan? Well, if you look at it, it's going to be the side, if you were on the west side of the house, on the west side, and you were looking east, you would be looking at what we call the west elevation. So in other words, the elevation name matches the side in which that side faces. So if you're standing on the west side, looking east, you're actually looking at what we call the west elevation. And if you look at the west elevation of this house, you see how you see square onto the end of the house, but the garage, you can see that it's twisted by those few degrees because you can actually see the north end of the garage. Okay, so interesting. You can tell a lot just by the orientation from the site plan what you're going to see on the elevation. Now the north elevation, again, you're seeing the north elevation. You're looking south and you're looking at the north side of the house, and see how the garage, if you look at the roof, see how much of the roof you can see on the garage. If that thing was sitting square to the house, you wouldn't see that. You wouldn't see that section of roof. So it's because of the angle that you can see it. Next page shows the other two views. Okay, so you have the east elevation, and the last one is the south elevation. So remember, the name of the elevation is the direction, the compass point that side of the building is facing. So this is one of those things that you got to kind of get into your head. If I'm looking north, I'm actually looking at the south elevation. Okay. And if I'm on the south side of the house and I'm looking north, I'm going to see the south elevation. So just so you can get your terminology straightened out. Now, next page, page 17. And here we have another type of elevation plan. This is an interior elevation. These are often used for things like kitchens, built-in cabinets, millwork, anything like that where you have things that are going to be constructed inside, but you want to see, oh, where's the double wide stainless steel fridge going to go? Where's the microwave going to go? Where's the oven going to go? These elevation plans will give you all that information. And incidentally, in the electrical field, we definitely depend on this a lot, because if you go into a room and all you see is a big wall there, but you know what they're going to be putting in millwork here, and the plugs need to be 6 inches above the countertop. And how high is the countertop going to be? So you're going to be looking into a millworking set of drawings to see exactly where you have to box your outlets. So lots of information that can be gained, but then again, these interior elevations are quite often part of an architectural section, not even an electrical section. All right. Now, when it comes to the the construction drawings, the set, there's one thing that even though we have different sections, architectural, mechanical, structural, electrical, and we know that each section can have a variety of different plan types, there's one thing that is pretty much consistent across the entire plan set, okay? And so it's kind of a point that ties it together. It's a reference point. You can always find your way around. And so I want to describe that to you right now. Very, very important part of the construction plan set. And it's called the title block. Okay, the title block. Now, every set, basically every page, every sheet in a set of drawings will normally always have a title block. And depending on the size of the project and how much information is involved, the title block may be larger or smaller. Most of the time, drawings are in a what we call a landscape format, so they're wider. wider than they are tall, and usually the title block is usually on the right-hand side, up and down lengthwise at the end of the right-hand side of the page. So if you see a page like this, it's very, very common for this section to be broken up into, and this whole area we call the title block. Now the page number is normally shown there, okay? It's quite often that bottom corner of the title block. Now, there's a lot of information here, so rather than write it all on the board, what I've done is actually included it in this drawing, but I just want to walk through it. And this is something that, don't take the stuff for granted, please take a look at it. But let's look at some of the items, not limited to these things, but this covers a lot of them, okay? So I've given you an example of a title block on page 18. And this one is for a project that we're going to actually look at the plans later. Fisheries and Oceans Small Craft Harbor in Mission on the Fraser River. And so I was able to get some of the plans from that, and it's really interesting. There's some interesting stuff there. Now the next page shows a legend, legends and indexes. Now, normally on the cover page of any section, whether it's architectural, electrical, mechanical, doesn't matter, normally there's going to be an index of drawings. Now, sometimes there's a master index of drawings on the front of the architectural, and that would be what it kind of looks like on this one. See, it says drawing index, and it shows the architectural sheets, the structural sheets, the mechanical, the plumbing, and the electrical sheets. Shows what sheet number it is and what subject that drawing is dedicated to. On the next page is this would be fairly common to see something like this, abbreviations that are used. We all know people sometimes throw around acronyms and abbreviations, and we're going, what does that mean? And so we basically we go to the Urban Dictionary, look it up, and sometimes it's not there. So what we have to do is we say, for any set of plans, you really need to check and see what the, if there's anything like this, there'll be a list of the abbreviations and things that are used in that set of plans. Next page is basically a schedule or a legend of symbols that appear in that set of plans. On the next page, I've just shown you there's the north indicating arrow. This is normally shown on virtually every page somewhere in the title block, Now, Table 5, I'm going to leave you to peruse. This gives specifically the information that most title blocks will include. And so you can see there, sheet number, drawing name, revision number, the scale of the project. Now, I'm going to talk about most of these things coming up still in a little bit more detail, especially scales and things like that. But this just gives you an idea of the things that would normally appear in that title block, okay? So please take a little time, and if you need to, you go ahead and just stop the video and go through those and make sure you're up to speed with those. Now, in the next couple of pages, I've given a little description of each one of those sections to try and give a little extra detail on them, okay? So the numbers that appear in the left-hand column of Table 5, there's some of them anyway. There's a little bit of extra description on page 24, 25, basically 24 and 25. Now, the one that I do want to talk about right now with a little bit of detail is, because it's a very important one, is item number 3 from Table 5. Item number 3. And that is the revisions. This is an extremely important point. And so normally somewhere in the title block, there will be a section, and it's called revisions. And it will start, I can't say that every set of drawings that I've ever seen is the same, but I can definitely say that almost all of them have been the same. And they start at the bottom. They'll put in a blank table of rows, and they start at the bottom, and they'll call this revision, sometimes 1, but sometimes even 0. And this is, this will be, for instance, usually at the point where the engineers basically put everything together and put the plans together and put all their stuff in. So it was, I would call this issued for approval. Quite often, the first revision issued for approval. Then at some later date, after it's approved, then it gets issued for tender, and that would be another revision, right? Tender. That'd be revision 1, and you'd have the date, and so on, and you work your way up. So what happens is, when your eye falls on this revisions block, you go, okay, if I'm up to this point, so here we would have what comes after tender, well, then it's issued for construction, right? Issued for construction. Now, after that, if we wind up with issues on the site, maybe it's going to have to get sent back, and some kind of a revision is going to have to be made, and so that will appear here. So we got revision 2, revision 3. And what happens is, it's very, very important. Let's say that you call to the architect and you say, I'm looking at this set of plans, and I see a problem. I see a real conflict, and I'm not sure how to move ahead with this because, it looks like what we have to do, but, there's something in the way, and this just isn't going to work. And so the architect will go, oh, I think we actually dealt with that. So I'm looking at revision 4, and it shows you going to doing this and this and this. And you go, revision 4. Oh, I'm looking at revision 3. Now, that might be your fault, or it might be the architect's fault for not getting the new set of drawings to you. But in any case, you're going to sort out pretty fast what the problem is. And everybody needs to make sure that they're working on the most recent revision, in order that when you communicate back and forth, that you're going to have some continuity, and you're going to be at the same place, on the same page, as we say. So everybody needs to be working off of the same revision. And so that is something that it's a responsibility that definitely falls, first of all, to the architect. And then from the architect, he needs to deliver the things to the general contractor. And then those changes definitely have to be passed on to the sub-trades and to the people who are actually building the things. And so oftentimes, this is a little bit where that chain can break down a little bit, is if the communication and moving any changes that have been made don't happen fast enough, okay? Now, there's one thing out of all of this that I want you to, there's a kind of a takeaway point, and this is just to summarize a little bit. We've been talking about the whole process of the plans and, what's on them. One of the things that we have here that's part of, it's usually one of the pieces in the in this title block, and it will be the information, contact information, normally a lot of times phone, mail, email, every possible method that you can get of contact information. And the idea is that when things come up, and nobody wants you to have the excuse of saying, well, I didn't know how to get a hold of the guy. And so it's on, literally, it's on every page, okay? Every sheet is gonna have that information. And what I'd also like you to understand is if you go back and you take a look at that diagram, essentially that flow sheet of the process, basically the life cycle of the plans. Who is it that always winds up dealing with the plans, taking the plans from one person, sending them here, sending them there, making the decisions? Always comes down to the architect. And so it's important that you understand that who is it that's really in the position of responsibility for ensuring that all the communication happens properly and the whole project moves through as it's supposed to, and that responsibility falls to the architect. Okay, so in terms of a key player, all the lines come and go from that group normally, and so that's they're in control of that. Obviously, once you get down to the general contractor, you're going to have more levels of responsibility and lots of bosses, but what it all comes down to is really overall the project. its success is going to depend largely on how well the architect takes care of it and does that work. Okay, let's go ahead and summarize a little bit and just kind of wrap up what we've been talking about. Um, when I look over here at the on my left side here, I've listed up here. These are the main divisions by letter. So architectural, structural, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, fire, civil, and landscaping. So those letters would be used for the main divisions of the construction drawings. Then under any one of those, you could have one or more of these types of plans represented. So not every section is going to use every plan type, but these are the main general plan types that can be used, okay? So most of these main divisions will use some form of a cover page, and that's where they usually put, quite often that's where the key plan will be on the cover page. Sometimes it's also worked together with a site plan, but quite often tabulated information like legends, a legend of symbols, legend of abbreviations, those types of things quite often placed on the cover page. The site plan, you can have one of these for any one of those sections. Key plan, same thing. Although the key plan is more often just used in the architectural, but it could appear anywhere if there was relevant information. Floor plan, definitely floor plans will appear in almost any of these, except maybe, you know, civil and landscape, because the floor plans are always interior areas, okay, interior. Section plans, anything that you wanted to describe from a floor plan in more detail with kind of a vertical facing view, you use a section plan. Anything you want to really get into a ton of detail on, you use a detail plan. And if you want just some side views of how these things are going to look at from all the different ways that you can look at it, that's where you're going to use elevation plans. Okay, so that's a summary of the general plan types. Now remember, every sheet in the entire construction drawing set will incorporate somewhere on it a title block. And quite often, as I mentioned earlier, it's down along that left side, although sometimes I think the plans we're going to be looking at, they have it actually across the bottom. So it can be found anywhere, honestly, but in most of the cases that I've seen, it's along the right-hand side of the page. Going down, it's where you're going to find that title block area. Now, the next thing that we need to look at, I'm going to take a little break, and this will be going to be the next session. We're going to start into this. Will be electrical specific plan types. So there are some plans that really are not going to appear anywhere else. They're not going to appear in, for instance, you know, some of the other sections. They're going to be very definitely kind of electrical types of plans. And so we're going to go into a little bit of detail and look at those. And then, of course, following that, I'm going to give you a description. We're going to talk about specifications, very important. Okay, so that's a wrap for this. And you know, please come back and take a look at the next one as well.